After years of giving everything to my family, I was blindsided by a single sentence. I hope she crashes. My own daughter-in-law, the one I'd loved like a daughter, had wished for my death. In that moment, I realized the truth I'd been too afraid to face. I had been nothing but a resource to them, and it was time to take back what was mine. If you've ever felt invisible or unappreciated in the ones you love most, it's time to stop sacrificing your worth. Subscribe and join me on this journey of rediscovering self-respect and reclaiming the life you deserve. I had always believed that Christmas should be about family, the warmth of togetherness, the sparkle of lights twinkling through the windows, and the scent of cinnamon and pine filling the air. And for as long as I could remember, I had done everything in my power to make Christmas exactly that for my son, Ethan, and his family. But this year, something had changed. Maybe it was the years catching up to me, or maybe it was the realization that despite all my efforts, I had been overlooked, taken for granted, and worse, dismissed. But none of that was clear to me yet as I drove down the familiar stretch of road that led to their house. The steady beat of the rain against the windshield was almost hypnotic, but it couldn't silence the nagging thoughts in my mind. I had been planning for months, a week-long family retreat in the mountains. I had put aside the vacation home that had been in our family for generations, hoping to make it a lasting gift for them. It was a place where memories had been made. Ethan's first steps, their honeymoon, and countless Christmas mornings. I had decided it was time to pass it on, a final gesture of love, before the years had taken their toll on me. I had been hoping, secretly hoping, that this Christmas would be different, that this would be the time when everything felt right, when I could hand over the keys and see the happiness in their eyes. But as I drove through the storm, the tension in my shoulders grew tighter, and the storm outside seemed to mirror the storm inside me. The world was a blur beyond my windshield, the lights of passing cars creating ghostly streaks in the mist. I rubbed my hands over the steering wheel, a dull ache in my joints reminding me of the arthritis I'd been fighting for years. But I ignored it. This was important. This was about family. This was about showing them how much they meant to me. I hadn't told Ethan or Claire about the surprise. I wanted it to be a moment, an experience that would take them by surprise, one that would show them how much I cared. I had a plan. I would arrive just before dinner, and I would give them the keys to the house. I imagined the look on Claire's face when I handed them to her. It would be perfect. My heart swelled with anticipation. But then, as I approached the exit for their town, my thoughts were interrupted by the memory of the last conversation I had with Claire. It hadn't been a pleasant one. She had complained, as usual, about how much I called, how often I wanted to spend time with them. "Mom, you need to stop expecting so much from us," she had said. "We have our own life now. You have to understand that." Her words had stung more than I wanted to admit, but I had pushed them aside. After all, it was Christmas. I was doing this for them. As the storm raged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I had been dismissed before, yes, but this felt different. This time, it felt like Claire was pulling away, not just emotionally, but physically, from me. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. I was close now, a little more than 30 minutes away. The rain intensified, making it harder to see the road. I slowed down, my grip tightening on the wheel. The familiar landscape of their neighborhood was just ahead, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought of Ethan. He'd always been more understanding, but lately, even he had been distant, as though Claire's influence had somehow overshadowed his better judgment. He'd grown up, and with that, the world had shifted in ways I couldn't fully understand. As I turned into the neighborhood, I felt the knot in my stomach tighten even more. I was here, almost there. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to be different. I had come all this way. It wasn't just about the vacation home anymore. It was about something much deeper, something I hadn't quite grasped until now. But I was determined. I was going to make this work, even if it was the last thing I did. I pulled into their driveway, and as the headlights illuminated the front porch, I saw them, Claire and Ethan, laughing, talking. But something about the way they were standing, the way their voices floated to me on the wind, made my heart sink. There was something wrong. I parked the car and grabbed the key holder from the passenger seat, my fingers trembling slightly. This was it, my grand gesture. But as I stepped out into the pouring rain, a sudden voice stopped me cold. God, I hope she crashes. It was Claire's voice. My heart stopped. I stood frozen in the rain, the key holder heavy in my hand. I didn't know what to do, what to think. The words I had just heard echoed in my mind like a scream in the silence. I hope she crashes? My legs felt weak. I wanted to turn around, get back in my car, and drive away, but something deeper kept me rooted to the spot. Then I heard Kent, Claire's husband, laugh. Or at least get lost. Give us a weekend without the guilt trips. Their laughter followed, and the sound of it stung more than the cold rain hitting my skin. I stood there, soaked to the bone, the key holder clutched tightly in my hand. It felt like everything had crumbled in that moment. The plans, the dreams, the years of sacrifice, all reduced to nothing. The realization hit me like a cold slap across the face. I had been nothing more than a burden to them. Without thinking, I turned and walked back to the car. The key holder still in my hand, I drove away into the storm, feeling the weight of the betrayal settle deep inside me. My hands shook on the wheel, but I didn't stop. The rain kept pouring down, and as I drove away, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The storm raged on as I drove away, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up with the deluge. But the rain seemed insignificant compared to the storm that had just exploded inside of me. The key holder sat on the passenger seat, untouched. I had no idea where I was going, and at that moment, I didn't care. I didn't even know if I wanted to go back home. My mind kept replaying those words, Claire's voice clear as day. I hope she crashes. The cruelty of it, the way Kent had laughed along with her, it was all too much. I had never imagined that the woman I had raised, the one I had cared for, fought for, loved unconditionally, could be so callous. I wasn't blind to our strained relationship over the years, but I had always convinced myself that the love between us was still there, buried beneath the surface. But what I had just heard shattered that illusion. I pressed my foot harder on the accelerator. The lights of the highway stretched ahead of me, blurring in the rain. I didn't want to think about them, about the house or about Christmas. I just needed to be alone with my thoughts, my pain, and the realization that I had been living in a fantasy. I wasn't part of their family anymore. I was just a resource, a means to an end. The more I thought about it, the more the truth settled in. All the Christmases I had spent with them, all the gifts, the moments I thought had mattered, they had all been a performance for me. I had given them everything, and in return, they had taken it for granted. The vacation home, the one I had planned to leave to Claire, had been a symbol of my love for her, my hope that she would continue the family tradition. But now, all I felt was resentment. My hands gripped the steering wheel, the wet road beneath me a blur of motion and reflection. I couldn't go back. Not now, not after what I had heard. I had spent my life trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect mother-in-law, but somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. And now, I was finally seeing things clearly. It was time for me to stop pretending that I was welcome in their lives, that my presence was valued. I pulled off the highway, turning onto a side street. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't return to that house, not with that key holder sitting on the seat next to me, reminding me of my misplaced hope. I didn't need to be the one to keep the family traditions alive. I had done enough of that for years. I reached for my phone, taking a deep breath as I typed the first message that came to my mind. I'm taking back the house. It's not yours anymore. I'll give it to someone who values it. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the send button. Was I being too harsh? Was I overreacting? A part of me still wanted to justify my actions, still wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I knew deep down that this was what I had to do. This was my line in the sand. The moment I took control of my life, my decisions, and my future. Without hesitating, I pressed send. The moment I did, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but it was quickly replaced by a bitter emptiness. I didn't expect them to understand, and I certainly didn't expect them to appreciate it. I wasn't doing this to get their approval. I was doing it because I had finally learned that I had to stand up for myself. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't care about their response. In that moment, I realized that what I had been seeking from them, love, appreciation, respect, wasn't something I could force. It had to come naturally, and if it didn't, then I couldn't keep giving pieces of myself away in hopes of earning it. As the rain continued to pour around me, I drove without a clear destination, my thoughts racing. Maybe I would head to the coast, find a quiet place where I could think. Maybe it was time to find something for myself, to start over. I didn't need to fix anything. I didn't need to make things right. What I needed was to reclaim the parts of me I had lost while trying to be everything to everyone else. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. What I had done was my choice, my decision, and for once I wasn't going to apologize for it. I deserved peace. I deserved to live the rest of my years without guilt, without regret. I reached for the radio, turning it on to a low volume, something familiar to fill the silence. A song from the past played softly, a reminder of who I was before all of this, before the obligations, before the expectations, before the role I had played as the family matriarch. It felt like a distant memory, but the tune was comforting, like a warm blanket on a cold night. The road stretched out before me, endless and open, and for the first time in years, I felt the smallest spark of hope. Maybe I didn't have to stay in the place I had been for so long. Maybe it was time to leave it all behind. The days that followed were a blur of silence, punctuated only by the occasional phone call or text from Ethan. I kept the phone on silent most of the time. I didn't need to hear their voices right now, not when I was still trying to process everything, not when the sting of Claire's words still felt fresh. The messages piled up, a constant stream of pleading, guilt-laden texts. They ranged from polite inquiries to frantic pleas for me to reconsider. But each one felt like a reminder of the manipulation I had so blindly ignored for years. "Mom, please don't do this. You're breaking our hearts. You've always been part of our Christmas traditions. We don't understand why you're making this so difficult. The house was supposed to be for the family, for our children, for the future." I could almost hear Ethan's voice in each message, but I didn't respond. Not yet. The silence was my choice now, my refuge. I had lived for too long in the shadow of their expectations, and now it was time to find clarity. The more I read their words, the more I realized how little they understood. It wasn't about the house. It never was. It was about respect, about recognition of the sacrifices I had made, about valuing me beyond what I could give. And I knew, deep down, that neither Ethan nor Claire saw me that way. I wasn't part of their family anymore. I was just the source of their financial security. I spent a few days in a small seaside town, away from the constant bombardment of messages. It wasn't glamorous or anything I would have expected to enjoy, but it was quiet. There was a sense of peace in the solitude, the rhythmic crashing of the waves, a reminder that life kept moving, whether I was ready for it or not. I stayed in a simple inn, the kind that smelled of salt air and aged wood. It was exactly what I needed. Time to think. Time to breathe. I wandered the beach each morning, the sand cool beneath my feet. I couldn't help but think of the vacation home, the one I had promised Claire, the one that had been in the family for generations. It had always been more than just a house to me. It was where Harold and I had built our life together. It was where we had dreamed of growing old, watching our children and later our grandchildren run through the halls. But now it was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. I didn't trust Claire with it anymore. The reality of what I had done was starting to sink in. I had taken back the house, yes, but the emotional cost was higher than I anticipated. I wasn't angry anymore. I was numb. The anger had been replaced with a strange sense of loss. The very thing I had hoped would bring us closer had driven us further apart. It had been an act of love, of hope, and now it was a reminder of how broken we had all become. I hadn't expected them to understand. I hadn't expected anything at all, really. But I hadn't anticipated the emptiness that would follow. The distance between us had been growing for years, but it wasn't until that moment in the rain, hearing Claire's voice, that I realized just how far apart we had drifted. There was no going back. The house wasn't the only thing I had taken back. I had taken back my life. After 3 days, I packed up and headed home. The drive back was much quieter than the one that had taken me to their house. There was no urgency now, no excitement for the family reunion I had once anticipated. The house had been a symbol of my effort to hold on to something that no longer existed. And now, I could see that clearly. The house would go to someone who truly appreciated it, not just because of the financial value, but because of the memories it held. I arrived at my house late in the afternoon, the sun just beginning to dip behind the trees. The house, like always, felt strangely empty, though I had filled it with all the things I had hoped would make it a home. Harold's cardigan still hung on the back of the bedroom door, his scent still lingering in the room, but the absence of our family weighed on me now more than ever. The truth was settling in. There was no fixing this, no going back to what once was. That night, I sat in the living room, alone, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel everything I had been holding in. The grief, the betrayal, the sense of abandonment. All of it swirled inside me like a storm, but for the first time in years, I didn't try to suppress it. I let the tears fall freely, letting go of the weight I had been carrying for so long. But even as I cried, I knew something had shifted in me. I wasn't going to go back to being the woman who bent over backward to keep everyone happy. I wasn't going to be the doormat anymore. I had spent so many years trying to make everyone else comfortable, trying to smooth over their imperfections, their faults, their disregard for me. But I couldn't do it anymore. Not after what I had heard, not after what I had learned. The phone buzzed beside me, and I hesitated before picking it up. It was a message from Ethan. "Mom, I don't know why you're doing this. You've always been there for us. I don't understand. Can we talk? Please, just talk to us." I stared at the screen for a long time. The message, though earnest, felt empty. It was the same thing they always said. "We don't understand," but I knew they would never understand. They couldn't see the years of sacrifices, of subtle manipulations, of taking and never giving. They saw themselves as the victims in this, but they weren't. They were the ones who had created this rift. I didn't respond. Not yet. The decision to stop answering wasn't just about me needing space. It was about me reclaiming control. I wasn't ready to engage in the same old dance, where I was expected to be the one who fixed everything, who made everything better. This time, I wasn't going to do that, not anymore. I set the phone back down and closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my decision settling around me. It wasn't easy. It wasn't painless, but it was necessary. The silence between us wasn't just the absence of words. It was the space I needed to rebuild myself. And as the rain continued to beat against the windows, I sat there, knowing that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be mine. The next few days felt like a strange limbo. The messages from Ethan continued, each one more desperate than the last. They ranged from concern to guilt to accusations. I let them come and go, knowing that no amount of pleading would change anything. My mind was made up, but my heart was a different story. As much as I wanted to respond, to explain, I knew I couldn't. I had spent too long trying to explain myself, trying to make everyone understand, and it had gotten me nowhere. The phone rang one evening, and I glanced at the screen. It was Ethan again. For a brief moment, I considered ignoring it, but something about this call felt different. Maybe it was the tone of his voice in the last text he had sent. "Please, Mom, I can't fix this without talking to you." I picked up the phone. "Mom?" Ethan's voice was strained, a mixture of frustration and sadness. "We need to talk. I don't understand what's going on. You've always been there for us, and now you've taken everything away. What happened? What did we do wrong?" I sat back in my chair, the silence between us heavy. I had been waiting for this moment. The confrontation I had known would eventually come. I had prepared myself for it, but now that it was here, I felt an unexpected twinge of guilt. I wasn't sure if it was guilt for the decision I had made or guilt for what I knew I had to say. "You haven't done anything wrong, Ethan," I said softly, keeping my voice steady. "But you've never really seen me, have you? Not in the way I needed you to. I've been so busy trying to make everyone else happy, trying to be the perfect mother and mother-in-law, that I lost myself in the process." I could hear him sigh on the other end of the line. "Mom, please, you're not making any sense. What do you mean, lost yourself? You've always been there for us. You've done more than anyone should ever have to. You gave us the house. The vacation home was supposed to be for us, for our family. That's why you worked so hard all these years." "Worked so hard for you, yes," I replied, my voice more forceful now. "But I did it all because I thought it would bring us closer. I thought it would give you something, give Claire something to value. But what I've learned is that it's never been about the house. It's been about me, about what I can give, what I can provide. I've given you everything, Ethan. I gave you my time, my money, my love, and in return, I've been pushed aside, dismissed." His silence spoke volumes. I could feel him processing my words, the weight of them sinking in. It wasn't easy to hear, and I knew it wasn't easy for him to understand, but I wasn't backing down. "I've been a doormat, Ethan," I continued, my heart pounding in my chest. "I've let Claire walk all over me. I've let both of you take advantage of my love and my resources, and I've stayed silent because I thought it was my job to make everything work. But it's not my job anymore. I'm done with it." There was a long pause, and when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, tinged with disbelief. "So you're just giving up on us? On me? On our family?" I could hear the hurt in his words, and for a brief moment I wavered, but I had to remind myself of why I was doing this. It wasn't about abandoning them. It was about stopping the cycle of exploitation. "No, Ethan, I'm not giving up on you, but I'm not going to keep sacrificing myself for a relationship that's only one-sided. I don't deserve that, and neither do you." I could hear him trying to find the words, struggling to understand my point of view. "But Mom, we're family. I don't get how taking away the house is going to fix this." "It's not about the house," I said, the words coming out more firmly now. "The house was never just a gift. It was a symbol. It was my attempt to give you something meaningful to keep our family together in a way that mattered. But instead of appreciation, I got resentment. Instead of gratitude, I got guilt trips. And Claire's words, 'I hope she crashes,' that was the last straw. That wasn't family, Ethan. That was manipulation. And I won't be a part of it anymore." I could feel the weight of my words pressing against me, the finality of what I had said. There was no going back now. No matter how much Ethan tried to apologize or reason with me, the truth had been spoken. And the truth was this: I had been complicit in my own mistreatment for far too long. "I never wanted to hurt you," I continued, my voice softening, "but I've been hurt too. And it's time for me to stop pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I need to take care of myself now, Ethan, and I need you to understand that." His voice was barely above a whisper when he finally responded. "I don't know what to say, Mom. I'm sorry. I don't know how it got this way." "I don't either," I replied quietly. "But it's over now. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. I need to find myself again." We sat in silence for a moment. I could hear the sounds of the house in the background, faint voices, the distant hum of a television. And then Ethan spoke again, his voice shakier now. "I don't want to lose you, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You won't lose me, Ethan," I said, my heart aching. "But you need to understand that I am not just a convenience for you anymore. I'm not something you can take for granted. I am still your mother, but I'm also a person who deserves respect, just like you." The conversation ended shortly after that, and I sat there staring at the phone in my hand. I had said what I needed to say, but it hadn't been easy. Part of me wanted to believe that the things I had said would change anything, but deep down, I knew better. The path ahead would be long and difficult. Ethan might come around eventually, but Claire? I wasn't so sure. I turned my phone off and placed it on the table, leaning back in my chair. There would be no more calls from them, no more texts. At least not for now. The silence, once so suffocating, now felt like freedom. It was a strange, bittersweet kind of peace, one that I knew would be hard to hold on to. But it was mine. And for the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally learning to live for myself. The days that followed felt both impossibly slow and incredibly fast, as though the world was moving in slow motion, but I couldn't catch up with it. My days were quieter, emptier, yet for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of calm. I spent my mornings in the garden, a place that had always brought me peace. The flowers that Harold and I had planted together still bloomed, though the sight of them no longer filled me with the same bittersweet longing. Instead, I saw them as symbols of resilience, of life continuing even when everything else around it seemed uncertain. The phone remained silent for the most part. The occasional message from Ethan would pop up. "Mom, please, we need to talk. I'm sorry. I don't understand what's happening, but I want to." But each time I saw his name, I didn't answer. The silence was necessary. I needed it to gather myself, to figure out who I was beyond my role in their lives. I had spent too long being the mother, the caretaker, the fixer. I had been the one to give and give without ever asking for anything in return. Now, I had to learn how to take something back. It was strange, this feeling of not having to constantly explain myself, of not having to justify my decisions. I had grown so used to the weight of others' expectations, Ethan's, Claire's, even my own, each of them pulling me in different directions, each of them demanding something from me. And for what? To maintain a facade of normalcy, a family that wasn't what it seemed, a family where I was seen as nothing more than a means to an end, a tool to be used when necessary? But now the question was, who was I without them? Without the title of mother, without the constant role of the one who gave, who sacrificed. For the first time in years, I didn't know. And that frightened me, more than I cared to admit. It was easy to be needed. It was easy to have a purpose. But when that purpose was taken away, when the family I had worked so hard to keep together began to unravel, I was left with a gaping hole in my life that I wasn't sure how to fill. I spent a few days walking the streets of Millbrook, my small town that I had always loved. It had been home for so many years, filled with memories of Harold and me, of raising Ethan, of watching him grow into the man he had become. The streets hadn't changed much. Same old oak trees lining the sidewalks, the same bakery with its enticing scent of freshly baked bread wafting out the door. But to me, everything felt different now. The town that had once felt so familiar and comforting now seemed alien, as though I no longer belonged. And perhaps I didn't. On one of my walks, I ran into Theta, my neighbor and friend for over 30 years. She was a few years older than me, but we had always shared a bond over our mutual love of gardening, books, and quiet afternoons. She had always been the one to bring a casserole when Harold was sick, the one who checked in on me after he passed. She was a good friend, one of the few people who had never asked anything of me. "Bertie," she said, her voice full of concern as she approached. "I've been meaning to check on you. Haven't seen much of you lately. How are you doing?" I smiled, though it felt thin and unconvincing. "I'm getting by, Theta. You know, the usual." She raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "I don't think so, dear. You're usually the one who keeps everything together. You've always been the strong one. So, what's really going on?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain everything that had been happening. But Theta was the kind of person who didn't let things slide. She would wait, patiently, until I spoke. Finally, I sighed and let it all spill out. "It's all falling apart, Theta. Everything. I've spent so many years trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect mother-in-law. I gave and I thought that was enough. But it wasn't. Claire. Claire doesn't want me there. She doesn't care. She thinks I'm ruining everything. And Ethan, I don't know if he even sees me anymore." Theta listened quietly, her gaze soft, understanding. When I finished, she reached out and patted my hand. "Oh, Bertie, you've been through so much. I've seen how hard you've tried. But there comes a time when you have to stop trying to make everyone else happy, especially when they don't appreciate it." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words sink in. She was right. I had spent so much time trying to fit into a role that no longer served me. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't the one who had changed. They had. Ethan and Claire had changed, and they had stopped seeing me. I had just failed to see it until now. "Maybe it's time for me to stop," I said softly. "Stop trying to fix everything. Stop hoping they'll change, or that they'll ever appreciate me the way I hoped they would." Theta gave me a knowing look. "It's about time, don't you think? You've been putting everyone else first for so long. You deserve better than that, Bertie." Her words were simple, but they hit me like a revelation. I had spent my whole life putting others first, and now I was finally being forced to put myself first. I wasn't sure how to do it, but I knew I had to try. "I think I need to start over," I said, more to myself than to her. Theta's smile was small but warm. "That's the spirit. You can do it, Bertie. You just have to believe that you're worth it." As I walked back home, I felt a shift in me, a faint but growing sense of possibility. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe it wasn't too late to find out who I was without the weight of everyone else's expectations on my shoulders. I had taken the first step, and while I wasn't sure where it would lead, I felt something inside me begin to stir. A quiet hope, the faintest whisper that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. The next few weeks were a blur of small changes. I didn't rush into anything. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic shift in my life. It was more like a slow, deliberate unfurling, a process of becoming. Slowly, I began to reclaim the parts of myself I had buried under years of expectations, guilt, and sacrifice. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but for the first time in years, I was looking for something just for me. I started with small things, a new routine, mornings that were no longer filled with a sense of obligation. No phone calls from Ethan or Claire demanding my time or my attention. No family meetings to discuss plans or problems. I could wake up when I wanted to, make coffee, and sit in the kitchen without the feeling that I should be doing something for someone else. It was liberating, in a quiet way. I spent more time in the garden, a place that had always brought me peace, but I had never fully appreciated it. There was something grounding about digging my hands into the earth, planting seeds, and watching things grow. It was a simple, tangible way to feel connected to something real. I had always loved the garden, but now it felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could go and breathe, where I could let go of everything else and just be. But it wasn't just about the physical space. It was about creating space within myself. I started reading again, books I hadn't touched in years, books that didn't involve managing a household or listening to complaints. I rediscovered my love for stories, for narratives that weren't my own. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just playing a role in someone else's life. I was living my own. The quiet solitude was strange at first, but soon it became comfortable. My home began to feel like mine again, not a place I inhabited in between taking care of others, but a space where I could breathe, think, and be myself. I started cooking meals for me, not for anyone else. There were no complaints about the food, no forced smiles or hidden discontent. I could make a meal because I wanted to, because I enjoyed it, not because it was expected. But the hardest part was learning how to be okay with the silence. It wasn't just about the absence of their voices, it was the absence of the need to justify, to explain myself. I didn't have to give them a reason for my actions anymore. I didn't have to justify my boundaries. For so long, I had been the one who absorbed everyone else's feelings, everyone else's desires, without ever considering my own. And now, I had to unlearn that. I had to learn how to live without constantly being at the center of someone else's world. It felt selfish at first, and yet the more I did it, the more natural it became. One afternoon, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, I thought about Ethan again. It had been weeks since we had spoken. His messages had become fewer, but still, he would text now and then. "I miss you, Mom. We're still family." But those words no longer carried the same weight. They didn't feel like the lifeline they once were. They felt like a plea, a last-ditch effort to salvage something that wasn't there anymore. I had tried to tell him, tried to explain, but I had given up trying to make him understand. I had to stop waiting for him to see me, to acknowledge the sacrifices I had made. I couldn't keep living in the hope that one day he would realize what I had done for him, for them. A part of me missed the family gatherings, the shared holidays, the laughter that had once filled this house. But that part of me, the part that longed for those things, was fading. I wasn't sure how much of it had been real, how much of it had been just another part of the role I had played. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't missing my family. I was missing the idea of family. I was missing the version of them I had created in my mind, a version that was never truly there. The silence between us didn't feel like abandonment anymore. It felt like freedom. And with that freedom came the space to finally breathe, to finally make choices for myself. It was a strange, unfamiliar kind of peace, one that I wasn't sure I knew how to navigate. But it was mine. It was a peace I had earned, a peace I had fought for. One morning, as I was tending to the flowers in the garden, I heard a knock at the door. Thence I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I hesitated. I had grown accustomed to the quiet, and the thought of having to deal with an unexpected visitor made me uneasy. But then I opened the door, and there stood Theta, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. "I thought you might need this," she said with a smile, handing it to me. I took the box from her, a little confused. "What is it?" "Just something to brighten your day," she said, her eyes twinkling. "You've been through a lot, Birdie. You deserve a little bit of joy." I opened the box to find a small plant. Nothing extravagant, just a simple succulent, its tiny green leaves peeking out from the pot. It was something small, something modest, but it felt like the first real gift I had received in a long time. It wasn't about money or grand gestures. It was just a simple act of kindness. "Thank you, Theta," I said, my voice soft. "This means more than you know." She nodded, giving me a knowing look. "You're not alone, Birdie. You just need to remember that sometimes the people who care about you aren't the ones you expect, the ones who see you for who you truly are. Not the roles you play, not the expectations you meet, but just you." I smiled at her words, feeling a warmth spread through me. Theda was right. I had spent so long looking for validation from the wrong people, from the people who had never truly seen me. But maybe it didn't matter anymore. Maybe it wasn't about waiting for them to see me. It was about seeing myself for the first time in years. As I stood there holding the small plant in my hands, I realized something profound. I wasn't just starting over. I was finally giving myself permission to live on my own terms, to stop pretending, to stop being the person everyone else wanted me to be. I was learning to be the person I had always been deep down, before the roles, before the sacrifices, before the guilt. I put the plant on the windowsill and looked out at the garden. The rain had stopped, and the world seemed washed clean, as though it too was starting over. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. The days continued to pass, each one flowing into the next, the rhythm of my life changing in ways I hadn't expected. The house, once a place filled with chaos and endless tasks, now felt like a sanctuary. The quiet was no longer suffocating, it was freeing. I spent my time in the garden, reading, cooking just for myself, and enjoying the things I had neglected for so long. But of course, life doesn't stand still, and sooner or later, the world outside will knock on your door. One afternoon, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was from Zoe, a longtime friend of Ethan's from college. I hadn't heard from her in years, not since the early days of Ethan and Claire's marriage. Back then, Zoe was always around, a fixture in our family gatherings, someone I had always considered a part of the extended family, but over time, she faded out of our lives. I assumed it was because she had grown closer to Claire's side of things. Or maybe, like so many people, she simply drifted away. So when her name popped up on the caller ID, I was taken aback. I hesitated, wondering if I was ready for another emotional conversation, another reminder of the family that had slowly slipped through my fingers. But something in the back of my mind told me to pick up the phone. "Hello? Bertie?" Zoe's voice sounded tentative, almost nervous. "It's Zoe. I know it's been a long time, but I wanted to check in on you. I heard what happened and I wanted to see how you're doing." I didn't know what to say at first. How could she possibly know? Was Ethan telling people about our fallout? My heart tightened at the thought. But then I remembered Theda's words. Sometimes the people who see you aren't the ones you expect. Maybe this was one of those moments. I'm doing okay," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's been a bit of an adjustment, but I'm getting there. I'm really sorry about everything, Bertie. I know I'm probably the last person you expected to hear from, but I need you to know something. Ethan and Claire, they don't get it. I don't know if they ever will, but I want you to know that I see you. I've been seeing things differently, and I just wanted to reach out. I miss you." Her words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. In all the years of giving and giving, I had never realized how few people actually saw me. Most of the time, I had felt invisible, a caretaker, a provider, but never really seen. Zoe's words were simple, yet they felt like a balm for wounds I had long forgotten existed. "I didn't expect to hear from you, Zoe," I said quietly, "but it's nice to know someone still cares." Zoe paused, then laughed softly, though it was tinged with sadness. I think I just assumed you were always fine, you know? You always seemed so strong. But now I realize that maybe I've been blind to everything you've been carrying. I didn't realize how much you were giving until it was too late." I didn't respond right away. There was too much to process. Too much pain, too much loss, and too many years of trying to make people see me for who I truly was. But Zoe's words lingered, like a lifeline thrown to me in the middle of a storm. It was a connection I hadn't expected, but one that felt important, in ways I couldn't explain. "I'm sorry for not reaching out sooner, Bertie. I should have been there, she continued, but I want to be now, if you'll let me. I miss the old days, when we used to sit on your porch and talk about everything and nothing at all, when family felt like family. Her words stirred something inside me, a nostalgia for simpler times when it wasn't about financial expectations, when it was just about being together. I had spent so many years thinking that family was something I had to fight for, something I had to prove my worthiness for. But in that moment, I realized that true family wasn't about who you were bound to by blood or obligation. It was about who could see you, who could love you for who you were, not what you could give. I miss those days too, I said softly. Maybe we could start again. I could use a friend right now. And just like that, something shifted. Zoe and I made plans to meet up. She was in town for a few days and I invited her over. It wasn't a grand gesture, just two women reconnecting over coffee, but it felt like the first step in rebuilding something real, something that wasn't built on expectations or what I could do for others. It was about just being present, being seen, and most importantly, being understood. The afternoon Zoe came over, I made my famous lemon bars, one of the few recipes I knew by heart, and we sat on the porch, just like we used to, talking about everything and nothing at all. We talked about the past, about Ethan and Claire, about how life had changed so drastically over the years. I told her about the vacation home, about how I had taken it back and given it to someone else. Zoe listened quietly, never once interrupting. When I finished, she just nodded, her expression understanding. "You did what you needed to do, Bertie," she said softly. "I can't imagine how hard that must have been, but it sounds like you finally stopped giving pieces of yourself away, and that's important." "I don't know what's next," I confessed, my voice uncertain. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, but I do know this. I'm not going to keep giving in to everyone else's demands. I need to start taking care of myself." Zoe smiled gently, and I realized in that moment that her support, her presence, meant more to me than I could put into words. She was one of the few who truly saw me, who understood what I had been through. And it wasn't just about this moment. It was about the years of unspoken understanding, the quiet knowledge that I didn't have to prove myself to her. She had always valued me, even when I hadn't seen it. "I think that's the most important thing you can do, Bertie," she said. "Start living for yourself, and if you need someone to help you along the way, I'll be here. No expectations, no strings attached." And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe it wasn't about fixing everything. It was about accepting where I was and finding new connections that didn't require me to give up myself. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with Zoe by my side, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the porch, I realized something. This was what family should have been about all along. Not obligation, not guilt, but understanding. And perhaps, with time, I could build a new kind of family. One where I wasn't just the giver, but also a receiver of love, of care, and of respect. For the first time in years, I felt like I was on the right path. It had been a few months since Zoe and I had reconnected, and each day felt like a small victory. I had learned to trust again, but this time, it wasn't about trusting others to validate me. It was about trusting myself, my decisions, my needs. I had stopped waiting for approval, stopped expecting others to fill the void that only I could fill. The phone calls from Ethan had become less frequent, and I was okay with that. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. He had his own journey to figure out, just as I had mine. Our relationship had changed, and maybe, in time, it would shift back to something more balanced. But I wasn't waiting around for that. I was living my life for me. I spent more time volunteering at the local women's shelter, finding solace in helping others rebuild their lives. The women I met there, many of whom had faced the same kind of emotional manipulation I had, showed me that healing wasn't just about time, it was about action. It was about making choices, even hard ones, to protect yourself. I felt like I was giving back, but in a way that wasn't draining. I wasn't fixing anyone. I was simply offering support. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, I thought about the vacation home. It no longer felt like something lost. It had been a gift I had offered with love, but it was now a symbol of a boundary I had set. I had taken it back, yes, but I had given it to someone who would appreciate it for the right reasons, someone who could see its value beyond just a material asset. It wasn't just about the house, it was about learning to let go of things that no longer served me. The first few months of this new life had been quiet, peaceful, but there was still a sense of possibility in the air. It wasn't about finding a new family, but about creating a life where I didn't have to prove my worth. I could finally just be. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for that. Zoe had become an important part of my life again, not in the way I had hoped things would be with Ethan, but in a way that was real and unencumbered by the weight of expectations. She reminded me that I didn't have to be perfect, that I didn't have to fix everything. I had learned that sometimes the best way to love someone, whether it was family, friends, or even myself, was to set boundaries, to know when to give and when to walk away. As I looked out at the garden, the sunlight soft and golden, I realized I had made it. I had finally found the strength to let go of the past, to stop fighting for something that wasn't meant to be. The storm of the past year had cleared, leaving me with the clarity to see a future I hadn't thought was possible. A future where I could be whole, where I could build the life I deserved, without guilt, without compromise. And as I took another sip of tea, the warmth spreading through me, I smiled. Maybe it had taken me this long to understand my worth, but now that I did, nothing could take that away from me. Life had a way of surprising you, of giving you second chances when you least expected them. And for the first time in years, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next.